Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, good morning, students. Let's start today's session with a silent prayer. Yeah, okay. So, introduction to forensic science, we were discussing about the history of forensic science. And where did we stop pertaining to the history of forensic science?
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning. Where did we stop? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
No. Where
Yes,
did we
sir.
stop then? Nobody's answering.
Sir, Edmund Lockhart.
Edmund Lockhart. Okay. Yeah, so I'll just revise that portion because I think it's been almost 2 weeks since you attended this introduction to forensic science class. We were discussing about history of forensic science, and we discussed about the history of chemistry and forensic toxicology, where we have Matthew Arufilla and James Marsh who have contributed to a great extent. right? And then we studied about forensic biology and serology, where you have Leon Lattes and yeah, for giving the blood grouping of dried blood stains, right? Um, then we also studied about the trace evidence, and trace evidence, the main person that is responsible for um, the development of this trace evidence is Sir Edmund Locard, right? And his teacher, is Alexander Rakasin. Yeah. So uh, Edmund Locard was the first person to set up a forensic science laboratory. It was also known as a crime laboratory. It was set up in Lyon, France. Okay. So this is just we have discussed about this case, right?
Sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So just go into that. Yeah, so Edmund Locard, you have to remember a lot about Edmund Locard because he has contributed a lot to the field of forensic science, um, uh, towards trace evidence, towards fingerprints also, where he has done a study on poroscopy, which are the study of pores on the fingerprints itself. So he's done that kind of a study that is there. Okay, uh, just 1 minute. Yeah, so this is the contribution that Edmund Locard had given, and yeah. So yeah, as I said, he has invented the field of identification through poroscopy. We have identification through many other means, and he's also done this poroscopy. But the major contribution that he has done is the principle of exchange, and we'll deal with this principle in some time, and other principles also. Okay. So here you have Locard's principle of exchange, and did we explain this?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So we see that the Locard's principle exchange basically talks about transfer of material from one object to the other, right, or between two objects. So here we see when this person is here, there is a transfer of his fingerprints to that surface, maybe dust from that surface to his finger, hair from from him to the scene, then cat hair from the cat to the clothes that he is wearing. So we see that there is a transfer of this. Carpet fibers may get stuck to the shoes, yeah, that the person is wearing. So we see that. Next, we have another contributor to the field of forensic science in the history and development is Calvin Goddard. Calvin Goddard is also known as the father of forensic ballistics. Ballistics deals with the study of projectile, but forensic ballistics deals with the study or application of the study of ballistics and firearms and ammunition to the field of investigation and law, right? So yeah, so Calvin Goddard was primarily a medical doctor and used to work in the U.S. Army, and he was what to say, he was very interested in firearms, in guns. So in 1925, he changed his full-time career that he had as an army officer. He changed that into being involved in the study of firearms. So his hobby was studying of firearms, and then he changed his hobby into a full-time career. Um, yeah, so he joined the Bureau of Forensic Ballistics in New York City, right? And they used to just at that time, there was not much of study that was done, or not much of, we would say, scientific analysis done. It would probably mean that they would just find out whether the gun was fired, for firearm was used to fire, or maybe range of firing to a certain extent. But Calvin Goddard did a lot of development, and we'll come to that in some time. Okay, so the Bureau of Forensic Ballistics was actually founded by Charles E. Waite. Okay, though Charles E. Waite has founded the first Bureau of Forensic Ballistics maybe in the world. Calvin Goddard is considered as the father of forensic ballistics because of his major contribution to the field. Okay, so Calvin Goddard took his place, that is Waite's place, who was the founder of the Ballistics Bureau, took his place in the year 1926. Okay. So this is one case. Anyone can read? Arya, can you read? Arya Tariel?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Charles Stilo, a farm worker, was accused of shooting the farm's owner, Charles Phelps, and Phelps' housekeeper, Margaret Walcott, during a robbery in 1915. Stilo owned a .22 caliber revolver, the same caliber as the bullets taken from the Phelps and Walcott's body. Albert Hamilton, a self-proclaimed gun expert, testified as at Stilo's trial that the bullets in the bodies came from the accused man's gun.
Yeah, continue.
Waite, in turn, told several firearms experts in the New York City Police Department to examine Stilo's revolver again. They found that the barrel of the gun was so clogged with grease and rust that it could not have been fired for years. They also compared photographs of test bullets fired from the revolver and photos of the murder bullets, and contrary to what Hamilton had said, found obvious differences between them. Acting on this evidence, the governor pardoned Stilo and the farm worker was released.
Yeah. So we see here what happened. If you all have read the case or listened to it, right? Charles Taylor was there accused. He was accused of shooting a farm's owner. Farm's owner, okay, that is Charles Phelps, and Phelps' housekeeper Margaret Walcott. Okay, so where he was trying to do a robbery. So Stylo had owned a 20.22 caliber revolver, okay, and the same caliber as that of the revolver was taken from the bodies of Phelps and Walcott's, okay, the victims. So Albert Hamilton, at that time a self-proclaimed gun expert, testified in this particular trial, saying that the bullets in the bodies came from the accused man's gun. But then we see that this case was then, or the evidence was then further investigated by Charles E. Waite, who was then the founder of the New York Police Ballistics Bureau, right? So he examined the revolver again, and they found that the barrel of the gun was so clogged that grease and rust that it could not have been fired for years. So that means the firearm was not used, right, at all. So maybe the bullets may be the same caliber, but may not be fired from that particular firearm because it was clogged and it was not capable of firing, right? Or if it was fired, then there won't be any kind of obstruction or much of grease present in the, or rust present in the firearm itself. Then they also compared the photograph of test bullets fired from the revolver and the photos of the murder bullets, and contrary to what Hamilton had said, found obvious differences between them. Okay, so this is when they had to leave Stylo. Okay, uh, yeah. So we see here, one minute. Okay, so you will be learning this in more detail, but just because you read about the case and you're studying about the history, right? So we see that here, this is a particular ammunition. Okay, only this part is the ammunition. Okay, so this part, this whole thing is ammunition, or we can say a live cartridge, is put into this firearm. When it's put in the firearm, you pull the trigger, right? When you pull the trigger, this firing pin that is there will strike the head of the, or the base of the cartridge. One minute, yeah. It will strike the base of the cartridge. Now at this base, you will have some kind of a ignition that is going to take place with the primer that is there inside this cartridge case. So the ignition of that primer, yeah, the ignition of this primer will result in the burning of the gunpowder that is there inside the cartridge. Once the gunpowder burns, the pressure is too much inside. So what happens is this part, that is the bullet, which is the projectile, this part comes out from this firearm. The cartridge remains there. Okay, so the bullet will then pass through this firearm, through the barrel, okay, and it will come out through the we call this as the muzzle end. Okay, so it will come out through the muzzle end of the firearm. So this is in most of the, almost all of the firearms which are having bullets. okay, will be working in this particular mechanism. Okay, so the firing pin strikes here and comes out. So when this bullet comes out here, the barrel of the firearm, okay, the barrel of the firearm is not smooth. Okay, it is basically rifled. Rifled means it is having depressions inside the barrel. So there will, it's like a spiral. So you, once you, if you look into the barrel of the firearm from this side, okay, you will see one spiral structure that is there. So when the bullet passes through that, okay, it, this spiral structure create some kind of scratches on the bullet. Okay, so once it passes here, this spiral structure creates some scratches in the bullet, because the bullet is not smaller than the uh, is not very smaller than the barrel, the size of the barrel. Okay, it is just about that size in which it is going to have some amount of friction, which is through which it is going to pass through the barrel in order to get aim and accuracy for the bullet. Okay, and so much of friction or contact will be there with the barrel itself, that these grooves that are there, right, these grooves will create some scratches on the bullet itself. Okay, so that is the reason why we are able to, once the bullet comes out of the firearm, okay, there will be some scratches on the bullet. So the pattern of these scratches is particular to that particular firearm. So let us say that this is a .22 bullet, and he has bought 10 bullets like this, and later on also if you buy 10 bullets like that, all the 10 bullets will have similar scratch patterns. So instead of scratch patterns, I will use the more technical term. We are going to call it as striations. Okay, so the same striations will be found in all the bullets. Okay, so it only matters is the caliber of the bullet and the firearm, right? So if the same firearm is used, all the bullets will be having the same striation pattern. Okay, so that is why in the previous case, in the case that you read here, again this revolver that Charles Taylor had, okay, they took the revolver and then they fired test bullets. Test bullets means I'm putting a .22 bullet inside the Stylo's weapon, and I'm firing and I'm collecting that bullet in a bullet collection box filled with cotton, right? So I collect that bullet and then I'm going to examine that bullet, compare that bullet with the scratches or the striation marks that are there, compare those striation marks with the striation marks that I found on the bullet that I recovered from the victims, and I find out whether there are same striation marks or different striation marks. So in this particular case, Charles E. Wade found out that the striation marks were different, right? And he saw that it is different, so hence the that particular firearm was not used to fire the bullets that were found in the body of the victims, okay, or bodies of the victims. Okay, so this is what will happen. You see in the previous, yeah, so it is clean, there is no striation marks here, but once it is fired you will have the striation marks in this kind of a manner, depending upon how this inside of this these lands and or these grooves are made, right? So depending on that particular pattern, you will have pattern formation on the bullets itself. Okay, so this is what we are going to call as striation marks, and that is what we will look into. So sorry, 1 minute. Now we were talking about Charles E. Wade, and we see Calvin Goddard. So what happened is we have to examine this particular thing. I think the slide I have missed to copy here. Okay. Yeah. So Calvin Goddard, okay, Calvin Goddard took Charles E. Wade's place, and he did a lot of study on bullets. And he is the person who has invented the comparison microscope. So with the comparison microscope is basically, we can say, two microscopes which are connected together, so you can see two specimens, right? And then we are able to do physical matches, like if there is a tone document, and then we can see whether there is a physical match. And similarly here for bullets, we will try and match the bullet that we have obtained from the body with the bullet that we have obtained from the firearm as a test bullet we have collected in the lab. Okay, so we'll try and match the striation marks to see whether the bullets are fired from the same weapon or not, right? So that is the contribution that Calvin Goddard has done with with the invention of the comparison microscope to the field of forensic ballistics. And comparison microscope is not only used for forensic ballistics now, it is used for many other purposes, comparing of paint chips that may have encountered in the crime scene, right? Comparison of tool marks, right? So these kind of things, the comparison microscope is used. Now the comparison microscope is nothing, is not a very complicated structure. Okay, it is basically two microscopes with one particular viewfinder. In that in that objective lens that, or sorry, the ocular lens that you're looking at in the microscope, you are looking at two specimens. Okay, half of this specimen and half of the other specimen, and trying to match it together to see whether there is similarities or not. Okay, so that is the contribution that Calvin Goddard has done. Okay, yeah, any questions still here? Okay. So I'm drifting a little bit away from the history of forensic science because maybe you are already fed up with history, right? So I'll just talk about the next unit. I'll start with the next unit, and I'll come back to I think two or three other contributors to the field of forensic science are there. Okay, so but these were the major things that you had to study about. And now we'll go into principles of forensic science. Okay, so principles of forensic science is like you have your Newton's laws of motion, right? So you have different principles and laws that are there in the field of, in different other scientific fields, right? But here in forensic science we have these principles. These principles are very simple, and when you probably, when you read the title of each principle, you may feel like, okay, what is this talking about? But the actual insight of the principle is very simple. Okay, you need to understand the basics of it, so that you can apply these principles. Okay, and each of these principles are very important in whenever you are doing any kind of forensic investigation or forensic analysis. Okay, it is very important that you follow these principles. If you do not follow these principles, the evidence that you may have collected in the crime scene may not be admissible in the court. Okay, so from the time that you are looking at the crime scene till the time you are giving your report, right? You have to ensure that these principles are followed. Okay, so we just go through them. So we have seven fundamental principles that are there. The first principle, we would say that it is the principle of individuality. Then you have the other principle, so we'll go into that. Individuality principle is there. You have the principle of exchange, which we have discussed, which was given by Sir Edmund Locard. Then you have the principle of progressive change. Then you have the principle of comparison, the principle of analysis, the principle of probability, and the principle of circumstantial facts. Okay, so you can call them as principles, or they also call as law of individuality, law of exchange. Okay, so we will call them as principles for now. Okay, so when you come to the first principle, that is principle of individuality. The principle of individuality basically states that every object is individual in nature. Every object is individual in nature, right? And you may say that, there are many objects that may look alike, right? But the principle of individuality states that every object is individual in itself. That means, let us say, shoes, right? A company may manufacture 100 shoes in one particular model, in one particular size, so they will have similar characteristics. Yes, true, they will have similar characteristics, but they will also have characteristics in such a way that you are able to differentiate one shoe from the 100 shoes that have been manufactured. Okay, so that is what is this principle of individuality, because every time the mold is used, okay, there will be some feature that is put onto the shoe that is not there in the other shoe, right? So that is the concept that is there during the process of natural uh, natural phenomenon, or well as in the artificial phenomenon or man-made objects, right? So there is a principle of individuality that you need to keep in mind, that almost that every object that you may encounter in the scene, every object that you encounter in the scene as an evidence, you need to bring out the individualistic nature of that particular evidence, right? So it is not that I found, let us say, soil over there. Now the soil can be from anywhere. It can be from within Bangalore itself. It can be from 10, 15 places. But how do I bring out the individualistic nature of that particular sample? And this is a very important phenomenon that you need to keep in mind. A very important principle, because evidence that you encounter in the scene of crime, evidence that you encounter in the scene of crime, we need to ensure that it is related to one particular object or one particular person. And that is how we can help the process of investigation. That is how we can help the police officers to track down the culprits, okay, or to narrow down suspects, things like that, right? So you have to keep this principle of individuality in mind in every object that is encountered. Now, not only in the crime scene. In the crime scene, maybe a police officer may go to the crime scene, he'll collect some sample and he'll send it to the laboratory. You are sitting in the laboratory, you receive that particular sample. When you receive that sample, you should apply that kind of a mindset as to, can I relate this to a particular suspect? Is it possible? Right? Now, if it is blood and things, that obviously you know that you can do DNA analysis. If fingerprints, you can get certain from things from the database. But if it's other types of samples, how can we bring out individualistic characteristic from that particular sample? Okay. Yeah. 1 minute. Yeah. So every object is either man-made or natural, right? Every object is either man-made or natural. But whether it is man-made or whether it is natural, there are certain aspects of that particular object that will prove or provide individualistic characteristics that we will be able to differentiate that particular object from the rest of them. Okay. So these characteristics are not present in the other objects. Now, the best example that you could give is the fingerprints, right? Fingerprints is, and yesterday you had a very good webinar or a talk by Dr. Mike on fingerprints at the crime scene and development of fingerprints, right? And we see that fingerprints is one of the such an evidence that if we are able to get a proper fingerprint in the crime scene, right, we will be able to solve the crime itself. We will be able to catch the culprit, right? So fingerprints proving a person's individuality. So one fingerprint, even if my 10 fingers, one fingerprint that I take is not the same in any of the fingers. Okay, so that is how individualistic I have to get into finding out this characteristic. Initially, you would think that maybe a fingerprint, some characteristics are there in this particular finger, say my thumb, may be present in the other fingers, but right, that is not the case. We are having different characteristics, different fingerprint characteristics in every finger of us, right? So that is how we are bringing out the individualistic individualistic characteristic of the fingers. Okay, so fingerprints are there. Then you have now DNA that is there as a an individualistic evidence, right? So how, we obviously we will not get DNA in the crime scene, but we may get, let us say, blood, or we may get hair, or we may get some other tissue, right, or other bodily fluid, right? So from this bodily fluid, what am I going to do? Now I'll give you another example. We have obtained blood from the scene of crime. Now, blood from the scene of crime can be dealt in many ways, right? We can find out the blood group. If you find out the blood group, then we may be able to find out only a group of individuals, right? Because there are many people who are having A positive, there are many people who are having B positive, right? Or any other blood group. There are many people who are having that. But we cannot say for sure that, okay, this blood that we found in the crime scene having B positive, it is belonging to person A. No, we cannot say that. That does not individualistic. Individualistic means that if I am saying that this particular person is having this particular characteristic, that characteristic cannot be duplicated or cannot be found in any other person. Okay, that is what is meant by this individualistic. So blood grouping is not individualistic. Blood grouping becomes a class, or a group. Okay, where you are going to get to a set of individuals or a group of individuals. But from the same blood sample, if we do DNA, right, DNA analysis, you will get a profile. This profile will have characteristics which are not present in any other individual. Okay, so that means if I get a DNA profile from the blood sample from the crime scene, and I will be able to get the profile of different people, but the profile will match only to one person. The same profile you will not get in any other any other person. So that is what is meant by this principle of individuality. Okay, so you have to keep in mind this principle of individuality. We have to get individual characteristics. Objects found in the crime scene as evidences, we are going to take them. What are we going to do with these evidences? Right? Are we able to get you know get to a particular object from that small object itself? Are we able to get to one particular set, one particular person, or one particular machine, things like that? So we have to get to one particular, so one individual, it has to relate to one person or one thing, right? Not a group of things. It may, you may be able to relate to a group of things to help you narrow down your investigation, but ultimately you need to try and figure out how we can further use that evidence to bring out individualistic characteristics. Okay, so that is your principle of individuality. Am I going too fast, or everybody's understanding?
Understanding, sir.
Understand.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so let us say again. Okay, um, individuality means, let us say, a device or an object's individuality. You need to prove its individuality. You need to prove that something is owned by that particular person. Okay, or under whose authority it is. So there are so many things that we can look at when it comes to individuality. I've explained this, so it's fine. Right? Principle of exchange. Okay, now the principle of exchange, I said, it is given by Sir Edmund Locard, and you may hear only of one part of the principle of exchange, that is, when two objects come in contact with each other, there is a transfer of material between the two objects. Fine. Yes. So if you touch, ah, let's take this bottle. So if I'm touching this bottle here, what am I transferring? I am transferring from my body, I'm transferring some sweat onto this bottle, and from the bottle there may be some dust particles which is getting transferred to my hand. Okay, so that is the exchange that is taking place. Now, next, the second part of this principle that you might not find in many books is that the amount of material that is transferred between the two objects is directly proportional to the intensity of contact. Okay, so what does this mean? That, let us say, two people are standing, okay, and they're having some kind of an argument. After having the argument, then they are just next to each other, and then they walk past each other. While walking past each other, one person bangs into the other person, okay, or dashes the other person. Okay, but then they just carry on with their walking, so they continue to go wherever they have to go. Let us take this situation to another level, wherein after the argument they start a fist fight, okay, and then they start throwing blows to each other, and then there is a huge commotion that is taking place between these two people. So what happens here? In the first scenario, we see that the intensity of contact is less. They only have dashed each other, but they continue to go. Okay. Now, when they dash each other, okay, will there be transfer of any material? Anybody can tell? Hello?
Hello,
So
Mana.
can you repeat it? Like, do they
Yeah,
just
sir.
walk past each other or do they like touch each other?
They touch each other. They dash against each other.
But sir, since they're wearing clothes, I'm not sure.
Okay. Anybody else?
So the cloth fibers could be interchanged.
Yeah, the cloth fibers could be interchanged. There could be an exchange. certain material from here to there. Fine. Now in the second case, wherein they argue and then they start fighting against each other, they're throwing blows, they're hitting each other. Will there be any transfer of material? If yes, then what?
Sir, cloth fiber tanna. I mean itself.
Okay. Anything else?
Exchange of epithelial cells.
Exchange of epithelial cells. Okay.
So what about blood?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So there is, when you say that there is a commotion or there is a physical, disturbance or physical contact that is happening between two people, the amount of physical contact that is there, if it is little or if it is more, right? So if it is little, there is contact, but transference may be less. If it is more, right, there is physical contact, there is more physical contact, so transference also will be more, right? So if I'm holding this bottle, if I, let us say that I'm taking this bottle and I'm holding it like this, right? When I'm holding it like this, what happens? Transference is less. There's less physical contact. But the same bottle, if I take and I hold it like this, the intensity of contact is more, right? And if intensity of contact is more, then transference also becomes more. The amount of material that is transferred or the types of material that may be transferred also become more. Okay, so that is the second part of the principle, that the more the contact, the more the amount of material that is transferred, or the less the contact, the less the amount of material that is transferred between the two objects. So these two parts of the principle you need to keep in mind. The first part is very simple: when two objects come in contact with each other, there will be a transfer of material between the two objects. And the second part of the principle is that the amount of material that is transferred is directly proportional to the intensity of contact between the two surfaces or between the two objects. Yeah. Any doubt here with this principle?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So in short, you would have seen maybe in TV shows, serials, or even on Google, every contact leaves a trace, right? But when you are asked to say or state the principle of exchange, you are not going to state every contact leaves a trace. The principle of exchange, you will state it as when two objects come in contact with each other, right, there will be a transfer of material between the two objects. And you have the second part of the principle, that is the amount of material that is transferred between the two objects is is directly proportional to the intensity of contact between the two objects. So that is how you are going to explain the principle of exchange. Now this principle of exchange, I can say, is the first principle that you need to keep in mind when you are entering a scene of crime for analysis, right? When you are looking at the scene of crime, you always have to figure out, if the person has entered, if the culprit has entered in this manner, what he could have left in the crime scene and what he could have taken along with him in the crime scene. So this is your principle of exchange, right? What is he exchanging? He's giving something to the crime scene, he's taking away something from the crime scene, right? Unknowingly, right? So we have to look into the crime scene in that particular manner. So when we look at this principle of exchange, we have to see the crime scene in such a way, right? He's entered through this door, he's exited through that door, this is his pathway in the crime scene. What has he taken along with him? What has he left? What are the things he could have left? Since he's coming from outside, he must have left some soil particle there, yeah, or he must have left his uh, his hat must have fallen off somewhere, okay? Or if he's touched this surface, will we be able to get fingerprints from this surface, right? So we have to start thinking in that particular manner. Only if we are able to keep this principle of exchange in our mind. It's a very simple principle, but many a times forensic investigators fail to implement this principle in the crime scene. And I've repeatedly told you all that forensic science starts in the crime scene. So in the crime scene, if you are not able to implement this particular principle properly, no matter whatever forensic technology you have in the world, you will not be able to utilize it. because you will not be able to recognize evidence. You will only be able to recognize evidence if you have this principle stuck in your mind, right? If you are able to understand how the crime would have taken place, where the culprit would have gone, what surfaces the culprit would have touched, what he has left behind, right? So we have to get this principle imbibed in our minds, right? So that we are searching for evidence in that manner. Many a times forensic investigators will go to the scene of crime. When they go to the scene of crime, they will look at the crime scene. If it is a murder, they will see the body, they will see the blood, they will see the weapon. They'll collect the blood, weapon, and they will go. They do not search for any other evidence, right? Because they feel that they've got blood, they'll get DNA from that, whatever. Yeah. But yes, you may get DNA, correct? But understand that when you have more amount of evidence to support the commission of crime, to support what would have happened, to support who would have committed the crime, when you have more amount of evidence to state that, then we can say that yes, this particular person only has committed the crime. But when we have one evidence, and even if we say that blood, from that blood we are not able to get a profile, it happens sometimes. Okay, if you are not able to get a profile, then we are not able to get anything further in the case, right? So this evidence collection from the scene of crime is an important aspect, but a more important aspect is recognition of any object in the scene of crime as an evidence. How do you recognize that as an evidence? Okay, on what basis are you going to do that? Because when you enter the crime scene, especially in country like India, right, where the crime has taken place, and then you have 5 10 people walk into the crime scene and walk out, right? So there is many material that may have been deposited in the crime scene. So when you approach the scene of crime, you have to look at the scene of crime and say, whether should I take this as an evidence, should I take that as an evidence, should I omit this as an evidence? This may be deposited at a later stage, right? So we have to gather information about the crime scene. We have to do a lot of questioning the informers, the victim's family, or the victims if alive, right? The first responding officer to the scene of crime. So we have to question them and get more information to find out whether we can count those things as evidence, right? And how do we do that? We do that only based on the principle of exchange. Because if we are saying that this particular thing we are taking as evidence, that means the culprit has come in contact with that particular object, right? That person has come in contact with that particular object, hence we can take that as evidence. And whatever you do at a later stage, right, whatever analysis, whether it is DNA profiling, whether you're doing some fiber analysis, whether you're doing some other chemical analysis, that is left, that is secondary, right? But we should also understand, when we are collecting the evidence, how much uh, is it going to relate to the culprit or not? Okay, so depending upon the basis of this principle of exchange. Just 1 minute. Yeah. So next one is the principle of progressive change. Yes.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yeah.
How long will the exchanged material will remain in it? I mean, if I catches a bottle, sometimes the oil from my hands may get exchanged. So how long will it remain in it?
Okay. So there is no preset time that it's going to remain for 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days. Okay. We are also looking at the oils that are deposited on a particular surface, after the oils are deposited on that, even after 3 or 4 days, we are able to develop fingerprints. Okay, so developing fingerprints, we would say as soon as possible is better, but sometimes over a period of time also we are able to develop fingerprints. Apart from that, the fingerprint residue, that is the sweat residue that is present on the surfaces because of the fingerprint, uh, s- over a period of time, even a short duration also, dust starts to accumulate on this fingerprint. So if you can also try this at home. Take a glass, okay, a transparent glass, just hold the glass like this, okay, and keep it in one place, ensure that nobody else touches it. And then maybe after 2 days or some 2 or 3 days or 4 days, take the glass and just take the glass and put some light, almost 45 degrees to it. Okay, when you put some light almost 45 degrees to it, you will be able to see some dust particles on the glass. So when you see the dust particles on the glass, at certain places where the fingerprint is, you will be able to see the fingerprint patterns where the dust has accumulated on that fingerprint. Okay, so you know that kind of thing also you can do in case the crime scene is old. Is your doubt cleared, Amrita?
Okay, sir. Yes.
Yeah. So the next principle is the principle of progressive change, right? And this also you need to keep in mind. Changes occur as time passes. Okay. So changes occur means everything will undergo change over a period of time. As I was giving you the example of the fingerprint, right? So the fingerprint left at the crime scene initially left fresh fingerprint. As time passes, the fingerprint becomes old. So there will be some change that will take place, right? There will be some change. It all matters on what is the environmental condition and how much the change is going to take place. So you have to keep that in mind. Any evidence, any object, any person, the body, the victim, the witness will undergo change over a period of time. Okay, so as I said, the criminal, the suspect also will undergo change over a period of time. What change? Blood drop from the body. As soon as it drops from the body, we know that the blood will start to agglutinate, right? It'll start clotting, right? Fresh blood will become dried blood later on. Okay, then dried blood has to be treated differently. Fresh blood has to be treated differently, right? uh, Again, dried blood over a period of time will start degrading if it is not preserved properly, right? So sometimes when you go to crime scenes that are really old, maybe sometimes we encounter crime scenes that are weeks old or months old also, and some we have to do some blood test on that. Sometimes blood test may not be possible, but obviously now with the recent technologies or recent techniques that are there, proven, we can use blood stains that are older also, okay, to do these tests, right? But we have to understand that the blood will definitely, or any bodily fluid will undergo change, right? So there will be some kind of degradation that is happening to these samples, and since it is a biological sample, there will definitely be chances of mold formation, right? Bacterial growth and things that will be there on these biological specimens. So changes will take place. When I say victims, witnesses, criminals, or suspects will also undergo change, how will they undergo change? Like the witness may say a statement 2 minutes after the crime has occurred. One day after the crime has occurred, he or she will add two words to the statement that he or she has made. 1 year later, the person will remove one sentence from whatever he said. Maybe he's forgotten that, or maybe he's added some false memory to that particular statement, right? So they will undergo change, right? The crime scene itself undergoes changes. Okay, so crime scene itself undergoes changes when people encounter the crime scene. uh, First responding officer, other forensic scientists, crime scene officers, forensic pathologists, whoever enter the scene of crime will definitely be doing some kind of change to the scene of crime, right? It is not going to be the way it was when the crime had taken place. So the crime scene will undergo changes, and everything within the crime scene also will undergo changes over a period of time. So this is what we are calling as the principle of progressive change. Any questions for this particular principle? No questions?
No, sir.
Yeah. So because of this principle of progressive change, we have to ensure that we are reaching the scene of crime as soon as possible, that we are collecting the evidences also as soon as possible in the appropriate manner, right? uh, though there are said protocols, you will be learning in your third semester of, to investigate crime scenes, right? And when you investigate crime scenes, you have to follow a certain procedure. You have to first search the crime scene, then you have to, you know determine the evidence, document, and then collect the evidence and preserve it. But many a times you may find that an evidence is there in the crime scene, and if you do all of these procedures, you may lose out on that particular evidence, right? So in that particular scenario, you have to see whether you have to, isolate that evidence, collect that evidence first, and then carry on with the other procedures. Because if you follow the said protocol, you might lose out on that evidence, right? So you have to keep certain things in mind, because when you say evidence will undergo change, depending on the evidence that is there, you have to ensure that you are not, ruining that evidence or not losing that evidence, right? So that is what is important. Yeah. Okay. Next principle is the principle of comparison. Okay. Principle of comparison is very simple, that like should be compared with like. Okay. That means similar articles should be compared. Okay. Um, Similar articles or similar articles of origin should be compared, right, when we are doing analysis. So we are saying, I'll give you a very simple example of signature and handwriting, because when it comes to question document examination, this particular principle is a very important principle that you need to keep in mind. There are, the if we have to follow this principle, we will compare signature with signature. And when we are comparing signature with signature, we have to compare it in such a way. Let us say a question signature is there. That means a disputed signature. We do not know whether the signature is genuine, whether it is forged. So it is questioned. Okay, we have to find out its authenticity. So that, let us say that signature is signed on a checkbook or a check leaf. Okay. So when the signature is found here on this check leaf, right, we have to compare the signature with some known standards, known signatures. So the original account holder, we will collect a signature from the bank, or we will tell him to sign. Okay. But we have to compare this signature following the principle of comparison, right? Comparing like with like. And how do we do that? Just because I've written away signature with signature, it does not mean that I will take the signature, standard signature or known signature of the person anyhow. I have to take the known signature of the person under similar circumstances. Okay, by looking at the forged signature, we can see whether it is a gel pen, whether it is a, you know a ball pen or an ink pen. Okay, so we can find out that. Then we see that it is made on the signature is done on a check. So even when we collect the standard signatures for a comparison from the person, we have to give him similar check, we have to give him similar pen. Okay, we have to give him similar conditions under which he has to make those signatures. So maybe we'll collect 8 to 10 standards of signature. Okay, and then we will start. All these signatures will be on checklists. Okay, all these signatures will be on checklists. If the fourth signature is made by using some gel pen or a ballpoint pen, right, we will give similar pen to the person to sign. Similar pen, similar checkleaf, because the spacing of the signature will matter, right? So then only we can get the characteristics, right? So if we just give him an A4 sheet to write, his signature is going to be maybe big, or a signature may be small, right? It won't be the proportionate size to what it would be on a check leaf. Because on a check leaf, if you can also try it out, right? You make a small box and you sign over there. Then you make a bigger box and you sign over there. And you make a larger box and you sign over there. So your signature will start varying in that itself. Anyway, whenever you sign, your signature will be different, right? Anytime you sign, your signature will be different. But what I'm trying to say is here, the space that is given has an effect on the person when he is signing over there. All right. So this is the principle of comparison that you have to keep in mind when you are doing your comparison of two objects. Let us say hair. When you do hair analysis, right? There is, head hair is there, then facial hair is there, then bodily hair is there. So when you're comparing the hair, we get hair sample from the crime scene. Now we might not know initially whether it is head hair or whether it is facial hair. We might not know. Let us assume that we do not know. Okay, so we're getting the hair from the crime scene, but many a times we will assume that it is head hair. Okay, but we will collect the head hair from the suspect and we will do analysis. We might not get a positive or a positive match. But if we are able to collect hair from different parts of the body and analyze and see, then we may be able to get a similarity between the hair samples, right? So comparison of like with like. So this comparison is very important. Bullet with bullet, cartridge case with cartridge case. Okay, bullet with bullet, cartridge case with cartridge is a little bit simpler, but the more important thing that you need to keep in mind is comparison while doing the question documents, right? Comparing handwriting with handwriting. Now comparing handwriting on rule sheet with comparing handwriting on rule sheet. Okay, you should not compare handwriting on rule sheet with handwriting on unruled sheet, because the conditions are different. Okay, if you do that then you are violating the comparison principle of comparison. Okay, yeah. Coming to the next principle, that is the principle of analysis. Now, this principle of analysis states that the analysis can be no better than the sample analyzed. Okay, so that means analysis can be no better. So, analysis is not better than the sample analyzed. So, the concentration here is on the sample. Okay, so we can say that this goes line with the principle of exchange. Okay, so in the principle of exchange we recognize the object as an evidence, right? Now the sample that you have got from the crime scene, the sample that you have got from the suspects, right? Standards or unknown samples, whatever samples you have got, the sample should be dealt with in the proper manner so that analysis can be done. Okay, it should be collected in the correct manner so that analysis can be done properly. If it is not collected in the proper manner, no matter what analysis you do, if you do analysis also, you might not get good results. And even if you are able to get good results, if the sample collection and sample processing was not done properly, right, the analysis done will not be used for further investigation, right? Because it will not be accepted, right? Because the sample was not dealt with properly, right? When I say sample not dealt with properly, we're talking about proper collection, proper preservation, packaging of the samples. Many times you have to collect control samples. Okay, in addition to that, a very important aspect is that you have to maintain the chain of custody for these samples. Okay, so the chain of custody also needs to be maintained in that particular scenario, right? So the principle of analysis is this, that the analysis is not better than the sample analyzed. So the concentration here is again on the sample, it is again on the evidence, right? There will be many techniques for analysis, but if your evidence is not collected properly, is not processed properly, you will have problems, right? Do not follow whatever you are seeing in your television shows or serials or movies, where every evidence they take and they put in one Ziploc bag and then they will send it to the laboratory, right? So that is not supposed to be done. You will see a wet knife that is taken, it is put in a Ziploc bag, and you will see the blood that is there is moving inside the Ziploc bag. That is not how it's supposed to be done. Okay, so I give you a very simple example. If a blood if a knife is there with some blood on it, the blood is wet, we have to dry the blood and then collect the process the knife in a paper bindle, right? So there is no plastic that is involved in the collection of these items. Very rarely do we use Ziploc bags for collection of evidence. We mainly use, paper bundles or, paper envelopes to collect the evidences from the crime scene. So proper collection, preservation, packaging of samples, control samples, collection of soil control samples, collection of GSR control samples, all of this is very important. Without control sample, if you send only the GSR sample that you have got from the shooter's hand, right? Or gunshot residue is what I meant by GSR. If I collect those samples from the shooter's hand or the suspect shooter's hand and I send it for analysis without a control sample, the analyst, the forensic scientist who was there, who was receiving the sample, will see that there is no control sample. And when there is no control sample, you will just have to write a report that the sample that is sent for analysis is not fit for analysis because of the absence of control sample, though you may get even a positive result. Okay, but sample was not collected properly. Because sample was not collected properly, we are not able to get the appropriate results. Okay, yeah, I'll stop here and then we'll continue maybe next class. And somebody has put a question saying that how much do we need to study for practical exam? That I will tell you all in the afternoon class. Okay, what all will come and the pattern for your examination. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, one more question was there, sir. Due to principle of progressive change, any case might get diverted. Who's this Mugdha? Can you explain your question?
Yes, I meant that evidences may change, any people, it was written people may change.
Mhm.
So due to that, the process of trial or any crimes and cases, it might get changed, right?
With relation to evidence, I wouldn't say that it will get changed. Okay, but with the relation to people, there is one more law that is there. We will deal with that law, and then probably this doubt will be cleared with that. It is the law of circumstantial facts or principle of circumstantial facts. So once we get to that law, I think your doubt will be cleared. But then we're talking about people changing. Yes, if people change their statements, then the case will get diverted to another level. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay then. So thank you very much, and I'll see you all in the next class.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.